A picture says 1,000 words, as the saying goes. I guess that means a feature-length film says a whole lot more, even if it doesn't say anything at all. Flow is an amazing movie, and I highly recommend you go and watch it for yourself. In this video, we'll be analyzing how this movie is able to connect with its audience without uttering a single word. Trust me, it goes a lot deeper than you might suspect. There will be some minor spoilers ahead, so be warned. Even so, I'd rather you form your own interpretation of it before watching this video, because it's one of those movies I think you just got to experience for yourself. I realize I'm about a year late to the party on this one, but better now than never, I suppose. Without further delay, let's get into it. To give a short overview, Flow is a movie about a cat who boards a small boat with other animals in order to escape a sudden and catastrophic flood. The cat is our main protagonist, who reluctantly forms a crew with a capybara, a lemur, a secretary bird, and a dog, sailing the vast waters on a rickety old boat. The story itself is refreshingly concise, in part because there's no dialogue. They're just animals. In fact, I'd say its simplicity is one of its biggest strengths. There's a lot of information that is intentionally left out. What could have caused such a massive flood so suddenly, for instance? The movie never tells us. My initial thought was maybe a massive meteor hit the ocean on the other side of the planet. Perhaps it was caused by a massive landslide or earthquake. One way or another, there must have been some massive and sudden displacement of water to cause such a flood. If you have your own theories, leave them in the comments below. I'm curious to see what you guys think. It's questions like these that pique our interest and get us pondering the possibilities. In fact, I'd say that element of mystery and open interpretation is part of what makes this movie such a unique experience. Of course, this is all very intentional. Director Ginsil Belotis in an interview said himself, "I want to give some hints about the past, what happened, where the people are, but I'm not explaining it. I'm asking the audience to participate in the storytelling." Early on, we see a boat stuck in a tree, suggesting that this isn't the first flood this world has had to deal with. We don't see any humans, but we see the things they've left behind, like the plethora of cat statues or the ruins of an ancient city long abandoned. We don't have much to go off of, but it's just enough for us to make our own inferences. It actually reminds me of a video by a YouTuber known as Infomercial, where he makes a similar connection between the game Dark Souls and the Bible, specifically the story of Abraham and Isaac. I know this seems like a bit of a side tangent, but stick with me on this one. The similarity is that there is so little explained within these narratives, which leaves us as the audience to speculate. What is this place? Who are these characters? What are their motivations? Sure, we can certainly make inferences and refer to other sources and commentaries, but very little is directly explained within the story itself. You see, our brains don't like it when there's missing information, so naturally it fills in the gaps with our own deductions and experiences. In a way, it's like an invitation to step into the shoes of these characters and immerse ourselves in their story. It makes us wonder what we would do in these scenarios, or what might drive us to act in the same way the characters react. In the case with Flow, the way the characters react is far more important and more interesting than background details, like the cause of the flood, for instance. To quote the director again, "For me, it wasn't important to tell this long exposition of this world or how the flood happened or where the humans are. For me, that wasn't that interesting. It was more important to focus on the characters and their journeys, how they change throughout the story." In other words, how the flood affects the characters is much more relevant to the story being told here. They're just animals after all. They don't care about why or how this happened. All they know is that they need to survive, and how they react in a survival scenario says a lot about their character. How people, and by extension characters, act and react to certain situations helps inform how we, the audience, react. Body language and facial expressions are key to effective visual storytelling. These are what help us to discern what a character is all about. The cat is very cat-like, curious but also quite standoffish. The dog is exactly what you'd expect from a golden retriever. The lemur is a hoarder. The capybara is just a chill dude who wants to help out others. The secretary bird, well, is a bit harder to pin down character-wise. It has a caring side, but can also be quite defiant. But the thing is, we don't need anyone to say anything to understand them as characters, because it is clear enough through what they do, how they react, and how they present themselves. It reminds me of a little tidbit I've heard before that asserts that, in a debate, you can usually tell who is winning by muting the audio. Even if you ignore the actual points being made, you can often tell by the debater's reactions. You can probably pick up on when a debater is cool and confident versus when one is ill-prepared and backed into a corner. We can also apply this principle to stories. Is the story able to convey a coherent and compelling narrative without any audio? If so, I'd say that's the mark of good visual storytelling. And it's fun to see how the characters interact with each other, and how their relationships evolve over time. The cat is initially dismissive of the dog, but eventually comes to care for him and the others. He learns to trust the other animals, thanks to the compassion shown to him by the secretary bird. And the secretary bird, while initially being very caring, becomes more emotionally distant in response to the quarreling amongst the crew. It's interesting to see how certain character dynamics affect the relationships of other characters, and how they contrast one another. It generates conflict and meaningfully impacts the direction of the story. And since the story of Flow is told through the characters' actions and expressions without dialogue or narration, it can be appreciated by any audience. You could show this movie to anyone, regardless of language or culture, and they would still understand what the story is fundamentally about. The movie was made in Latvia, and yet I, as an English speaker, can experience it in the same way someone from Japan or Brazil would. Its simplicity and lack of a language barrier makes it a universal story, and yet each viewer brings a unique experience through which they view it. It all depends on your personality, life experiences, and cultural background. Coming from a Christian perspective myself, I immediately think of the story of Noah and the Ark in the book of Genesis. I mean, a massive flood with animals surviving by boarding a boat for several days? It's hard not to make the connection. And there are tons of flood stories from cultures across the globe, so the basic premise has a lot of precedent. Not to mention all the stories of people lost at sea or caught in a storm while on the water. These sorts of literary motifs are common because things like these happen to people all around the world. Most people aren't sailing the ocean blue, but we've all heard stories. You can probably list a few shipwreck stories off the top of your head right now. I think stories like these are captivating because they spark the imagination. What would I do if I was lost at sea? What would I be willing to do to survive? What would I be willing to tolerate? And since the animals in Flow are so open-ended in terms of characterization, we can more easily relate to them. We can see ourselves in them and how they react during a catastrophe. Would you be reflexively distrustful of the strangers that cross your path like the cat? Perhaps you would strive to save others like the capybara. Or would you prioritize protecting your prized possessions like the lemur? Maybe you would try to find enjoyment despite the circumstances like the dog. Or would you be re-examining your priorities in life like the bird? Which one do you most relate to? Each character has something unique to bring to the table, so you'll probably end up relating to at least one of them by the end. All of this is very intentional. You can tell it's been handcrafted by talented people to tell a deeply personal story. Director Zimbalodis has even gone on record to state that the cat's journey takes inspiration from his own experiences in working with a team, which helps give this film a nice personal touch. In fact, I think that's one of the biggest strengths of independent media. Quite unlike your average big-budget production with huge teams of writers, which too often just seems to muddy the story in order to appeal to a generic target audience. But Flow wasn't made by Hollywood bigwigs. Don't let the literal 2 minutes of logos at the beginning of the movie fool you. This movie was crafted by a small team of passionate creatives with a shared vision, and it's all animated in Blender, a free open-source 3D art program. It goes without saying it's practically a miracle that it was able to go toe-to-toe with some of the biggest movies of the year, and come out on top despite only having a fraction of the budget. And it was only able to do so because it was so effective and unique in its storytelling. Flow obviously isn't made like your average movie. Watching through the first few minutes will tell you that much. This is most apparent in the cinematography. It's made in an almost documentary-esque style, with naturalistic camera movements and long drawn-out shots. This is also a very deliberate choice, almost as though we are alongside the characters as the events naturally unfold. The movie isn't demanding our attention with rapid cuts every 5 seconds. It takes its time and rewards patient viewership. Not everyone is going to appreciate the slower pace, but I think it's really refreshing and makes for a unique viewing experience. It's the kind of stuff you can only get from indie creators. You rarely get this from Hollywood productions because they tend to have their set way of doing things and standards of what a movie needs to be. But independent creators are not bound by the judgment of corporate executives. And that gives stories like these a strong sense of authenticity too many movies lack nowadays. By contrast, the team behind Flow has more than demonstrated their skill and passion for storytelling. Now this is only the tip of the iceberg in regards to what makes this movie so great. The unique style, relatable characters, and soft world building are all outstanding features, but I've also barely touched on things like cinematography, lighting, color, sound design, music, and so much more that is crucial for the experience. But I hope that you've at least gained some insight into the storytelling techniques that make Flow stand out from the rest. Stories like these are timeless. I'd even go as far to say that Flow is a masterpiece. There's just nothing else quite like it. You can legitimately scroll through to just about any timestamp and frame that on your wall. I'm telling you, this movie is gorgeous. Considering it was made by such a small team, I'd say it most certainly deserved its awards. So yeah, thank you for watching through to the end. I started working on this script back in... oh jeez, that was back in February. I guess I just kept getting distracted by shiny new projects, so it took me a while to get around to finishing this one. But I've had plenty of fun making short-form content in the meantime. And I've been posting a bunch of art on my Instagram page and on my community posts tab here on YouTube. So if you want to keep up with what I've been up to, those are the places to go. And if you made it this far, let me know in the comments which character from Flow you most relate to. Personally, I'd like to think I'd be like the capybara, rescuing whoever I can, but I have a feeling in practice I'd be more like the cat and just want to be left alone. To be frank, I don't know if I could handle being stranded on a boat with a bunch of strangers day and night. I don't do well around strangers, but that's just me. But I think the internet makes things a little easier in that regard. I mean, you guys seem pretty cool. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a blessed day, and Godspeed. Personal log number 0678. I just got word back from High Command about a recent discovery. Nyakian research ships have reportedly intercepted a satellite that is human in origin, over 15.7 billion miles away from Earth. They seem rather surprised to have discovered such a primitive vessel out in the middle of nowhere on a dwindling power supply. They've transmitted to me images of the vessel, and what they described as a strange gold disc of some kind. I was astonished. This vessel was none other than Voyager 1, launched by NASA almost 50 years ago. I recall watching videos from human media about such satellites, which were primarily used for research purposes. However, they also carry messages for any extraterrestrials who may stumble across them in interstellar space. The language is still indecipherable to them, which is why they requested that I translate it. The disc happened to be created by speakers of American English, a dialect which I have become quite fluent in from studying human media. Following this recording, I will transcribe the message into the common Nyakian dialect to transmit back to High Command. With any luck, this message might just change their tune about humanity. Maybe then they will see this as a worthy research endeavor.